Tuesday afternoon, these words shocked the entire country, including Mehbooba Mufti.
गठबंधन सरकार में आगे चलना भाजपा के लिए संभव नहीं होगा. It has become untenable for BJP to continue in the alliance government in Jammu and Kashmir.
Now, for the 7th time, Governor's rule seems inevitable in Jammu and Kashmir, with Mehbooba Mufti stepping down.
बीजेपी की तरफ से जो विड्रॉल ऑफ सपोर्ट हुआ उसके बाद मैंने अपना रिजिग्नेशन जो है गवर्नर साहब को भेज दिया है.
I am not surprised by the decision, though I must admit the timing has taken me by surprise.
जब से बीजेपी ने जम्मू कश्मीर में पहली दफा सरकार में कदम रखा तो हमने उसी दिन बताया था जी कि जम्मू कश्मीर की बर्बादी शुरू हो गई.
The Rocky Alliance saw many flashpoints in its 3.5 years of existence.
As far as governance is concerned, it was full of nepotism, favoritism. People alleged that there is absolutely no accountability in any department.
Here is what the state faces today. Large number of terrorism attacks, violence and clashes, attacks on civilians. We've shown you how schools are suffering, healthcare is in shambles, and the environment faces many risks. Tonight, Mirror Now asks, is this better for Jammu and Kashmir? Let's debate.
Good evening. Tonight, no netas are allowed on this panel. Yes, we will debate the future of Jammu and Kashmir. Yes, we will discuss the performance of the government that has now fallen and whether it has really damaged the state of Jammu and Kashmir in its 3.5 years of tenure. There is no denying the fact that from summer of 2016, when Burhan Wani was killed, to the last few months, violence has overshadowed everything else, the lives of Kashmiris yet again. This after we saw some improvement post-2010. Shujat Bukhari was killed a few days ago. So was rifleman Aurangzeb. Several smaller units of forces are targeted almost every second day, and that continued even during the period of Ramzan, where a ceasefire had been announced. But we will also talk about the fact that schools in Jammu and Kashmir have suffered, that education for little children has suffered. Schools have practically remained shut half of this year. Last year, many of them were burnt down. Healthcare is in shambles. Primary centers have no support system at all, especially in the valley. Allegations of corruption have emerged at the Srinagar main hospital. Environment is being ignored. There is garbage now piling up at few of our favorite tourist destinations in Kashmir. So what happens now? Will the advent of governor's rule bring in a sigh of relief, bring in some amount of positivity for Jammu and Kashmir? Will any of these issues that I just spoke about be actually addressed? That's primarily what we want to talk about tonight. We do not want any loud rhetorics. We do not want netas bickering over each other, which is why they have not been invited tonight. Let's say good evening to our panelists then. Barkha Dutt, senior journalist, joining us this evening. Netri Bhatt, also with us this evening. Vinay Tiwari, consulting editor, with me in our studios. Mir Farid, he's our Times Network correspondent, also with us this evening. Rahul Jalali, senior journalist. Colonel V.N. Thapar, a defense analyst, and Sushant Sareen, an internal security expert. But I want to go across to Barkha first and ask her what she thinks about what has happened today. Barkha, do you think people of Jammu and Kashmir will be heaving a sigh of relief? Is this good for Jammu and Kashmir?
Thank you, Tanvi. I think you've raised a very, very important question. As somebody who believes in democracy, it may surprise you to hear me say that I'm actually glad that this alliance is over. I'm glad that we are heading towards governor's rule in Jammu and Kashmir. And the reason that I think that no one will be mourning the demise of this alliance is because its internal contradictions were pulling its people and its regions apart in two completely different directions, making the administration of India's most sensitive state almost impossible. The PDP and the BJP agreed on virtually nothing. They had an agenda of alliance agreement that was written by Ram Madhav and Hasib Drabu. But the fact of the matter is, on the ground, on a day-to-day basis, philosophically, there was no meeting ground at all. And I want to share something personal with you. When Mehbooba Mufti's father, Mufti Muhammad Saeed, was alive, he told me, he said, you know, bringing the BJP and my party together is like bringing the North Pole and the South Pole together. But we don't have an option. We have to do it. Otherwise, Jammu will be divided from Kashmir, and these are the only available options given the fractured mandate. The fact of the matter is, at that time, I thought this alliance was a great idea. I thought the hyper-nationalism of the BJP and the soft separatism of the PDP would moderate each other, Tanvi. Instead, I find that this alliance has only fed the extremists in elements on both sides. It's created contradictions, it's created a mess, and it's created an absence of consensus on national security as well as a political outreach in a state where we can't afford those contradictions. So I don't think people will be mourning the demise of this alliance, and quite honestly, nor shall I be as a reporter and an analyst on Jammu and Kashmir.
I know you said that people will be surprised, especially those who believe in democracy, because you're saying this, but the fact is that this was an alliance of compromise. The two parties who have absolutely nothing in common decided to come together, irrespective of their common minimum program, because they wanted to be in power. And repeatedly, when every flashpoint happened, we asked them this question: why are you continuing in this alliance? They were never on the same page. They barely spoke in the same language. But I want to go across to Fareed first and ask him, Fareed, you've seen the situation change over the last few years. You've seen it in the previous regime and now. How do you read what has happened today? Should it have happened a long time ago?
Yes, it should have happened a long time ago. As Barkha explained it pretty much categorically, the fact of the matter is that these two coalition partners were together just for the sake of power. Other than that, on almost every issue, there were poles apart. And what that was doing was governance was suffering. And right now, it had reached a point where almost every sphere of governance was nowhere to be seen. Security situation, just look at the security situation. In the last 1 month alone, while the PDP did manage to pull out ceasefire, obviously this was a window given by the government of India to PDP to experiment, do whatever they can. If they think that situation may normalize or there could be some semblance of normalcy returning, fine, we can take it from there. But look at what happened in the last 1 month. Though it had a build-up of the last 3 years, it seems that the tipping point obviously was the killing of Shujat Bukhari. After that was decided that enough is enough. Amarnath Yatra is around the corner and we can't take any chances with that. Our sources in the government, in the establishment tell us that, in fact, in the last 1 or 2 months, Mehbooba Mufti, being the Home Minister, had literally tied the hands of the security forces because she wanted ceasefire to be successful. And from that, she wanted to take it further and see in it a resurgence of the PDP, because PDP as a party is gone, because they have a huge loss of faith, loss of face at the same time. South Kashmir, their main bastion, is gone. It is right now the hub of all kind of activity, from protests to militancy, you name it. So then they thought that through ceasefire they may make some kind of a comeback. But obviously what has happened is that this has backfired. And today, Mehbooba Mufti, one could really see her in her press conference, her body language. She was obviously shattered. They know that PDP resurgence would be a huge thing in the coming time. They'll have to battle all sorts of elements. But even if you touch the governance part, Jammu versus Srinagar, you had BJP ministers who had absolutely nothing to do with Kashmir. Yeah. You had PDP ministers who would give two hoots to Jammu. They had absolutely no agenda. They just wanted to satisfy their own constituencies. That's I'm talking about the governance part. You name any sphere of politics, governance, they had absolutely destroyed it in many ways. So this would be a sigh of relief for the common man, because governor rule may at least ensure that politics takes a backside, or it goes in the back burner, and governance, security and all the important aspects that people want return.
But since you've been covering it from ground, what do you think was the turning point? The tipping point may have been the decision to end the ceasefire or wanting to extend it. But what was the turning point? Was it deciding to give amnesty to those pelters?
Well, to name one turning point, it would not be precise. I think there was a series of events that led to this. Yes, there were initially, on the very first month as the coalition started, Mufti Mohammad Said's decision to release Masrat Alam was the first major flashpoint between the two parties, and ever since they have been just grappling with the situation. As I said, the only meeting ground was to ensure that the coalition goes on, but each passing day, both the parties realized that this was a big blunder that they did, and somehow it was now a game of who would foul whom, who would be the first one to ditch the other side, and it seems BJP has come trumps in that. Now they can really go across and say that, see, we, for the sake of national interest, we ensured that we don't need power, we need national interest, and for that we'll have to govern J&K from New Delhi. Obviously it will be governed by the BJP, maybe through a different mechanism from the governor, but now at least the politics that we used to, that we saw in the last some time, where we saw politics being played, PDP trying to play its revival card, BJP giving it some space, and then at the end of the day it all turning out to be a big disaster. So this is probably the right thing that has happened at the right time. We still have 2.5 years to go for the election, and maybe governor's rule may return some semblance of normalcy. Maybe people may feel more secure, because after what has happened in the last some time, especially the killing of Shujat Bukhari in broad daylight in the heart of Srinagar, that was a message sent across that we are here, we'll hit you, and as the police and the security agencies seemed helpless. So in all these aspects, we hope that maybe some semblance of normalcy, some sense of security may return to the people,
look forward
and
now,
maybe they can build it from there.
and talk about what we can expect. Vinay, we don't know how long this governor's rule could continue, 2.5 years maybe. We've seen longer times in Jammu and Kashmir. Would it be safe to say that perhaps it will bring in more stability?
Well, however odd or warped it may sound, yes. I mean, as Barkha rightly said at the start, I mean, this is very unusual for any one of us as journalists to actually be suggesting that something which is principally non-democratic to be a better solution in a state. But just to add to that one small point, I think I'm a little surprised when you practice a politics of grabbing power at any cost without assessing or understanding or weighing the implications of that. Alliances like Jammu Kashmir happen. The fact of the matter is that I doubt if there was anyone outside of the BJP who actually thought that this alliance can reap any reward. The law of diminishing returns of this alliance and for the state started on day one this government got formed. And now, consequently, you have a situation where they've lost 3 years. The state's law and order situation has obviously declined. Militancy has obviously risen. People are far more disillusioned. And you've had a series of salutary events in the state that has completely changed the narrative. So if you had to look ahead, heading into the general elections, the BJP frankly now today has a much tougher task today than anything else, because for them the benchmark of the 2019 elections is something that they cannot ignore. It's not really about 2.5 years, it's really about 1 year. They have to show something within a year to really make, to actually uphold the image that the Prime Minister currently holds of a decisive man. How else will you do it? Is that enough time? Can you actually fix that state in a year and a half? Is something that is very tough to say. From all evidence on the ground seems tough, because the situation has really worsened in the last 3 years or so. I don't see situation happening or it returning to normalcy so quickly. Obviously, you will expect, because the politics has been of being a hardliner party, you would expect action on the ground far more than it has happened so far.
Well, so Mehbooba Mufti had a word of caution in that news briefing, and she didn't really lash out at the BJP. I mean, as quick as BJP was to blame Mehbooba Mufti for everything that has gone wrong, she just had a word of caution to say, I don't think muscular policy is going to work right now. Rahul Jalali, do you believe that it would not be sensible right now to go all in with a strong muscular policy, as she put it, or is that the first thing that we need to do to bring about some normalcy in Kashmir?
Well, I think there is no other option left, because look at what's happening in Srinagar, and especially after the murder of Aurangzeb and Shujat Bukhari. What else do you do? I mean, there are bomb blasts every day in Srinagar. And look, for the last 10 years, the areas of Srinagar which were never targets of the terrorists have become one. Shujat Bukhari was killed by motorcycle-borne terrorists in an area which is a part of the high security zone. Similarly, a day later, in an area called Karan Nagar, which is within handshaking distance of the police headquarters, bombs were thrown. Firing took place. Terrorists arrived there. Now, this is something which had never happened. The other factor which you've got to look at, look where Kashmir has gone under this alliance. That in 2011, there are panchayat elections held which have 80% polling. And last elections, where Dr. Farooq Abdullah gets elected, only 6% poll. So look at where the democratic processes had gone under this alliance. From day one, this alliance was doomed to failure. Look, they spent 2 months conjuring up an agenda of alliance. They also decided then to have a coordination committee which will run that agenda. Do you know the coordination committee was never formed? So, and you had BJP on one side, which never looked at Kashmir, and I'm talking of the local government. You had PDP on the other side, which was never bothered about anything else but Kashmir. Secondly, you had an administration going to pieces with no one in control. You had legislators and ministers who couldn't get out of their homes. So what kind of situation was this? I now believe with governor's rule there, because Omar Abdullah has backed out from forming the government, so there is going to be governor's rule. I think the only option left before the centre and before the governor is to launch what they call Operation All Out to create a near normal situation in Kashmir Valley. Things have gone. I just pray and hope that they haven't gone beyond control. Things are really bad there. On Eid, I called up friends in Srinagar, and no one was celebrating. They were all within their homes. Their homes had become their prison. No one had gone out. The sense of fear was so great that people in Srinagar, their lives had come to a dead halt. I mean, this is a repeat of the 90s. Exactly what happened, the situation of 90s was taking place right now in Srinagar. The element of fear. I know after Shujat Bukhari's killing, there are so many moderate voices within the civil society who have come to Delhi, and they're afraid of going back. So this sense of security will, unfortunately, I do believe in a government functioning in Srinagar, but unfortunately today we've come to a pass where you need to use a strong arm tactic to bring Kashmir to some semblance of normalcy.
So, I completely agree with you. There is a sense of fear. People are quite unsure right now, but there is also a lot of anger. There is a lot of anger in the way things have been handled, in the way promises have been made and forgotten. So, just to take your point forward, and I want to throw it to Barkha. Do you think, Barkha, that at such a time when there is also this amount of frustration and anger, that a harsher crackdown, will it help or will it just add further fuel?
Look, Tanvi, when we talk about anger, I think it's important to say everybody in Kashmir is angry. Everybody, and they're scared. I completely agree with Rahul. And when I say everybody, I mean the moderates, certainly. They're the most terrified because they're scared of taking a middle position and being punished as Shujat Bukhari was with an assassination. The security forces, the police officers, and the ordinary Kashmiri. have spent pretty much 20 years of my life reporting Kashmir. And I will tell you, I've been in touch with local policemen on the ground. And do you know what they tell me? They say things have changed so much, things have become so terrible that women and little children now walk up to their posts and snatch their weapons away. That there is a complete sense of an absence of fear in one entire generation of Kashmir. You know, the Prime Minister used to like to say that we'd like to see Kashmiris holding laptops instead of stones. This is a cliche. These old formulas are not working. There has been a sharp spike in the number of educated young men who are picking up the gun. There's a resurgence in local militancy. Many of those who are becoming militants are PhD scholars, trained engineers, children of government headmasters. Remember Burhan Wani. Now we can agitate over this. This is not some justification or rationalization. I'm just saying things as they are. Education is no longer a deterrent to militancy. So where I do agree with Rahul is a state cannot talk about a peace process till a state has a state's writ, a control over the situation.
Yes.
Right now, the state has no sort of authority. And what we needed governor's rule for was to restore the authority of the state. But I want to add just one sentence and not take up too much of your time. Today, we saw the BJP blaming Mehbooba Mufti entirely for the situation. Now, certainly as chief minister, the buck does stop with her. But the fact of the matter is that for 3.5 years, the BJP has also known exactly what their differences are in ideology. So if this is a failure of the government's Kashmir policy, it is as much a failure of the PDP as it is of the BJP, and it is also a failure of a wildly inconsistent Kashmir policy by the central government.
No, I do agree with you there. So let me take that across to Sushant Sareen and then to Colonel Thapar. There has been damage done by the inconsistent policy, Sushant Sareen, and I don't think BJP can walk away from this saying it wasn't because of us. They knowingly went into this alliance, then they allowed either the PDP to decide for a bit, and then they came out and changed the policy and said something else, and there has been so much of back and forth, isn't it?
Tanvi, I think let's be clear about something. This problem hasn't started because these two parties formed an alliance in 2014. This is a problem which has been brewing from around 2010, 2011. You could even go back to 2008, number one. So to just dump it all on these two parties, they have been remarkably incompetent in the way they have handled their alliance. To my mind, it was a natural alliance. Because they had separate constituencies, they were yin and yang, they could have come together, the chemistry didn't work. It should not have taken them 3 years to realize it, but nevertheless, they've broken off, and there is nothing undemocratic about what is happening. Political parties do break apart, number one. Number two, to say that this was an alliance only because they wanted power. Please tell me which political party is a philanthropist party which does not want power, which is not into power grab. All parties are into power grab. There's nothing intrinsic about that. It's how you get power, which is what the problem is. Number three, let me join issue with Barkha. When was education ever, anywhere in the world, a deterrent to militancy? Osama bin Laden is a prime example, and I could keep on quoting every single big ticket terrorist, and I can tell you what his educational background was. The problem.
I mean, Sushant, I agree, but the government doesn't realize that. I agree with you, Sushant, but the government doesn't realize that.
No, which is what I'm saying. Every single government, whether it was the UPA, whether it was the NC, what was the feckless administration of Umar Abdullah all about? For 6 years, he was the chief minister. What was was there anything to write about the way he was administering the state? So clearly the problems had started, and there is an entire ecosystem which has been built up which promotes militancy. There has been indoctrination happening, which is why you have headmasters' kids and professors and all these people taking to militancy. It was happening in front of our eyes. People were pointing it out. Everybody was sleeping over it. The question now is, however, that you call it strong action, but I would be in favor of smart action. You can't send in battalions and brigades of soldiers and security personnel, and carry out the kind of squashed earth operations which the Pakistanis do. We are not Pakistan. We are a far civilized society. We cannot behave like that. And yet you have to clean it up, which means you have to cleanse the administration, which is easier said than done. has very badly infiltrated at the district administration level, at the police level. You have to clean up the judicial system. You have to clean up a lot of things in Kashmir. Can a governor's rule do it? I don't know. I would be surprised. After all, you can have a governor's rule or president's rule for 3 months, then you have to keep extending it every 6 months. So there is going to be that problem. And please remember, we have always boasted about bringing back the political process, and that political process has now been derailed. If you can't hold even a single by-election in a constituency which the chief minister of the state vacates and her brother is going to fight that election, can you hold an election in the state? Which means that for the foreseeable future, there is no political process which is going to be undertaken. And that means a huge problem, because once the initial flush of action by the administration is over and the tightening starts, people will want to look for relief. There is no political process. It creates its own dynamics and its own alienation. And then the soft separatism of the PDP was hand in glove with many of these separatist parties and reaching out to them.
Bit of a problem with your audio there, Sushant. We're just going to try and fix that. But I also just want to point out, if you can hear me, that I disagree with you when you say that this is yin and yang, so it should have worked, because from day one we saw that the problems emerge and they didn't know what their policy is going to be, despite the fact that it took months and months to come out with that common minimum program. When it came to dealing with pelters, whether you should crack down on them or give amnesty to them, they absolutely had no clue what they wanted to do. And look at the way the voices came out for the Kathua gang rape and murder. The government couldn't even speak in one voice for such a gruesome crime. That's what it had come down to. But let me go across to Colonel Thapar and ask him as well. Colonel Thapar, do you think this is a good decision? That this wasn't really working for anybody?
I think it's a very apt decision, and I welcome it wholeheartedly, because things had been going, gradually sliding down. Now, what I believe, 2 points I want to clarify. That first of all, it's a very urgent need to restore the writ of the state, which is altogether absent today, and also bring about the respect to law, which nobody is interested in. Nobody is worried about the law being there or not being there. So these are the 2 urgent requirements that will get the state on even keel, along with, of course, other steps. All this while, I've been listening a lot about the muscular policy. I don't understand what is muscular about what the army has been doing. Please see that armed men, self-respecting armed soldiers, soldiers belonging to legendary battalions and have seen action all over, they are being kicked, they are being slapped, they are being pushed around, and there is a limit to the tolerance. And still you keep on insisting that some using this word muscular policy. It is not at all muscular. It is just a very patient and tolerant kind of a behavior on the part of the security forces. Now,
no, they weren't being given that. No, they were. No, Colonel Thapar, that's exactly the point, isn't it? That they were being told to take this all patiently. That despite all of that, there was a ceasefire that was announced, and then they were repeatedly also attacked during that ceasefire. So my question to you is, do you think it's a good decision, even from the point of view of forces? That there was too much of confusion that even left our security forces confused of what had to be done exactly on ground?
It's a very good decision, because now whatever is the policy will come from one point, and there will be no ambiguity about it, there will be no conflict about it within the 2 power centers, be it in Srinagar or be it in Delhi. So 1 point, and we've got an very experienced governor, and I think we should look forward to things improving very rapidly. That's the way I look at it. And the other thing is that I was talking about Pakistan. Pakistan is a very big player in this game, and we are trying to minimize its role. Possibly Mehbooba ji has been all the time trying to say that we should have talks with them. Please remember, everybody should remember that Pakistan has got an official anti-India, Kashmir-centric policy and is dead set to implement it. And therefore, they'll leave no stone unturned. We must be practical in our approach to this kind of a thing. The other thing I want to make a small point is that as any reasonable human being, Kashmiris also want to live a peaceful life. They want to live a life with their families happily. They want to till their land.
Yes.
They want to attend to their business, and they want to send their children to schools, and they want to grow like normal human beings. The kind of atmosphere that is prevailing there and the kind of atmosphere that is willy-nilly being encouraged is robbing them of all these things.
So let's talk about that.
Where on this earth?
If you will allow me this, I just want to take that point because that is what I wanted to address next. And I want to go back to Fareed and ask him this. Fareed, what is the sense you're getting from people on ground? Do they see this development as something good in terms of their own life? Some amount of peace, some amount of a breather, school, education, healthcare, what about all those things?
Yes, Tanvi, there is a sense of relief. I spoke to some people on the ground. They say that this should have happened a long time back, but at least this has happened now. Governor's rule at least means that there would be some basic sense of governance will return to the system. Governance, when I say Kashmir, obviously is always or most of the times in news because of all the wrong reasons. You only have militancy, violence, army, militants. But then on the other hand, you have a Kashmir where people want good governance as well. They want, as you rightly said, schools. They want good medical facilities. They want a general governance like any other part of the country. So that aspect may be also tackled well as far as the governance rule is concerned. But as far as going back to the main thing where this blow hot, blow cold policy of the present government, you had an operation all out in the last 3 years back. In fact, after Burhan Wani's death, more than 300 militants were killed. So what happened after that was that each militant who was killed or local militant who was killed, there were huge, big funerals. That led to more recruitment, and then it became a vicious cycle. Now, right now also there are recruitments that are happening, so they'll have to look into it. It's not something that may change overnight, but at least the political interference, the local political interference where for petty political gains, they used to interfere in almost everything, try to ensure that things work according to them rather than the common sense attitude where you need to have you cannot go ahead with the blow hot and blow cold policy. Now, after that, you suddenly had a ceasefire, and now we know what that ceasefire really led to. So common man really wants that good governance should return, political interference should end, and a basic sense of security should return amongst the masses, which has been very badly shattered, especially with what has happened in the last at least 1 month, and the tipping point being the killing of the renowned journalist Shujat Bukhari.
Yes, absolutely. Basic sense of security. That's what people want right now. Netri Bhatt, thank you for patiently waiting by all this while. You've heard everybody on the panel. What would you like to say?
So here I would like to make a few points about the ideological difference and about the demographical difference. So in Jammu and Kashmir, we have ideological differences wherein we have two parties making a coalition government, but they have two ideologies. So they have two agendas. So the BJP was headed by, the government and the demography of Jammu entirely. So they didn't find any consensus in Kashmir, and likewise for PDP it was Kashmir. So we could see Mehbooba Mufti taking unilateral decisions there. So when I say unilateral decisions, they were pro-Kashmir decisions which actually fall apart with the ideology of BJP here, if we can understand. So the second point of understanding here is abrogation of Article 370 and 35A. So if we had to revoke 370, it didn't happen because the other party in coalition was not in terms with the same. Apart from that, they were thinking about that this Ramzan ceasefire would really help them have that sense of trust, but it was a total trust deficit at the end of the day. It didn't work out. the ideology for the stone pelters again didn't work out. So being smooth on stone pelters cannot be, a kind of understanding that can really work out in Kashmir. They have to be hardliners. Like we do have hardliners in Kashmir already, but you cannot be smooth on them as well. PDP not talking on at frontline segments of Kashmir demography and what's exactly happening in Kashmir in terms of terrorism, when Pakistani flags are hurled, when ISIS flags are hurled, when people talk anti-nationalistic, they put on their views in anti-nationalism. They cannot say much because they have to keep their people happy, and that is something that didn't work out with BJP there, which we really need to understand and which we really do acknowledge now and welcome that with governor's rule coming in, this would turn out to be a single segment ideology from the center, and they can really turn out well for the army, giving them a hand that yes, they can have those strategic, their segments, and they can have these strategic turnouts at the war front also when it comes to killing those terrorists. So they don't have to be apologetic about what happened at the end of the day.
So, okay, I'm told Sushant Sareen wanted to come in at the, and had raised his hand. Yes, go ahead, please, and then I'll move on to Mr. Jalali and Barkha.
Oh, shit.
I think I just wanted to say something which Rahul I alluded to, which is that there's a sense of deja vu over what's happening right now. And frankly, anybody who thinks that by imposing president's rule, we will be able to get a semblance of normalcy in Kashmir, I think they are not understanding or they're not smelling the ground realities in Kashmir just yet. I think the situation is pretty serious. It's deteriorating by the day. And this normalcy, I'm afraid, is not coming back in weeks, months. If it comes back in a few years, I'll be, nobody will be happier than me. And if I'm proven wrong, I swear nobody will be happier than me. But I fear that this is not going to happen. The other thing is that, this constant, we're constantly harping about this alliance and unnatural alliance. I don't know which alliance is a natural alliance. Is the Congress JDS alliance in Karnataka a natural alliance? Which alliance is ever natural? All alliances are unnatural. So, there was nothing extraordinary about what happened in Kashmir. So we need to take the political reality of Kashmir as separately. And we have to understand that what is happening today and what is going to happen from tomorrow is something which has been brewing for almost a decade now. It's now coming, it's becoming ripe right now. And we will have to handle this situation. We have to brace ourselves as a country to handle this situation over the next decade, if not more. I fear that is the truth. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, I agree with you that perhaps none of these alliances are natural or make sense, but that still doesn't mean that it makes this one right, because there are so many others, and especially when it begins to impact people so badly and it's at such a large scale, then it becomes even more dangerous, which is why when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir, people especially say this with such a aggression. Mr. Jalali, do you want to respond to what Sushant Sareen has just said?
Oh, well, I tend to agree with Sushant. You can't have army being a panacea for all your problems. That's not it. I mean, you need much more in Kashmir. Look, the kind of ideological spread of a type of radical Islam which is taking place in Kashmir, you've also got to have some kind of answer to that. The second point is the manner in which these people control the administration of Kashmir. So you've got to also look at that. So it is not just a question of fighting terror. It's a question of also deliverance in terms of cleaning up the act in Kashmir, which is much more than just the army alone. Secondly, I mean, when you look at Kashmir policy, I'm afraid as yet I do not see a game plan there, because what till now, especially when you come to the ruling party at the center, their attitude towards Kashmir has been a little knee-jerk. You don't have a concrete policy. I hope they have one. Now they've ended the alliance and the governor takes over. So I hope they don't put all their eggs in the army's basket, because army will deliver. Army did deliver during the 90s. Then the political process, the manner in which it was carried out, completely took the agenda backwards, and you are where you are today. I won't only say that these last 3.5 years have been responsible for what's happening in Kashmir. They might have accelerated the process, but the seeds were sown much earlier.
You read?
These are aspects which you've got to look at. Secondly, I think I get a hint that this is connected. This decision to withdraw support is somehow connected to the forthcoming national elections.
Of course.
I do not think Kashmir policy needs to be linked with that. It should not be sacrificed just because you want some more seats in the parliament come the parliamenary elections.
Well, it seems like you've read my mind, Mr. Jalali.
Kashmir policy,
and on both of those aspects,
where there is one little bit which I like to add. This long-term political consensus needs a consensus of all the political parties in Delhi. I think they all need to sit together and thrash out one policy for Kashmir.
I've always believed that army cannot be the solution. Army can be the enabler to create an environment where the government then comes in and does the rest of its work. Barkhada, do you agree, and do you think with the governor's rule and with BJP in center, that is something that we can look at? Prime Minister Modi has repeatedly spoken about development in Kashmir. He has gone there often to inaugurate bigger projects, but on ground, that hasn't really brought about change in the lives of Kashmiris.
So Tanvi, I agree in large measure with Sushant and Rahul, but disagree on some parts. Let's first talk about the army. I have known virtually every general officer commanding who has served in the Kashmir Valley over the last 2 decades, as have all of our eminent panelists today. Each one of them has said to me off the record that, look, we did our part. We reduced the numbers of militants, we contained militancy, we improved the security situation. It was then the turn of political imagination and a robust, consistent Kashmir policy to step in. You know, there's this phrase that certain TV channels use called anti-national. I think the real anti-nationals are the politicians who've let down the soldiers. We're sending our men to die every day because we couldn't be bothered with creating a consistent Kashmir policy that's supposed to step in once militancy is contained. I'm not saying eliminated, I'm saying contained. And I'm saying we have had a series of missed opportunities in the last decade. The last 3.5 years, yes, Sushant, yes, Rahul, this alliance is obviously not the genesis of the Kashmir problem. But I think you would agree that there has been an exacerbation of extremist elements, and that this alliance has played to the extremes, both in the region of Jammu and in the region of Kashmir, to the extent that the extreme Hindu right wing and the extreme Kashmiri right wing today have become mirror images of each other. They're both as intolerant, they're both not willing to look at another point of view, and it's the moderates in the middle that are getting snuffed out. And once governor's rule is able to bring a semblance of control of the state's authority, we have to find a way to strengthen the political moderates, because otherwise we're going to reach a point where we will have absolutely no one left to talk to.
Colonel Thapar, do you agree that army can only be used and often we put far more emphasis on pulling them out and then sending them again without actually doing anything else when it comes to the Kashmir policy?
That's a very fair comment, and I fully agree with it. All that I want to submit to everyone who's listening to me and to the panel here is that this is the time, or in fact it was always a time, when we should have every force or every player in the game should have synergized his effort into this one sharp focal point of restoring order in Kashmir, which has not been done. People are pulling the rug off the feet of anyone who's making any positive or trying to make anything positive. Any policy decision, it is decried by somebody else sitting there. For example, I can give you, people are coming from Delhi having chai pani with the Hurriyat. What for? I don't understand. They have no role to play. They haven't been told to go there. And that's the kind of thing that sends wrong messages all over. And it must stop forthwith. As far as the army is concerned, let me assure everybody that we have our own rules, regulations, ethos bringing up. And we are more than fair. We are fairer than any of the people, any other players who are there. And anyone who feels that the army will indulge in excesses is absolutely and totally wrong. Because we will not. There is a law by which we are governed. There is our bringing up, and there is the, like I said, the ethos of the army which will come into play. We shall never do anything wrong. I can assure you on that.
Right. So let's talk about the larger policy, which our panelists spoke about, that's still missing. We still don't know that, and it's highly, do you think it's possible that if over the next 1 year we'll actually see something concrete take place?
Tanvi, I alluded a bit to it when I started off, and I'll add a little bit more to it. My biggest fear, and that fear is still as deep as it was at the start of the day, is that if the government decides to try and solve or quote-unquote improve Kashmir with 2019 elections in mind, we have a serious problem in our hand. Because the policy and approach that you will adopt, keeping in mind the national election, will be different from adopting a policy keeping the interest of Kashmir in mind. And I still don't know whether we have that kind of a political resolve currently to actually try and solve Kashmir without keeping 2019 national elections in mind. I think that's a big question mark. We would do a tremendous amount of injustice to the state if the next 13 to 14 months are used or to fix the problem keeping the elections in mind, because that really will not necessarily improve the situation in the state. We can't, I mean, I don't want to be presumptuous and try and read the government's mind, but I'm just hoping that we are not trying to solve this problem keeping that in mind. The timing of the withdrawal, of course, seems to be linked with that, and that is why it raises the suspicion that they've obviously done it because now they realize that diminishing return has gone on too far. There is one other small point which I wanted to add. It may sound very frivolous to some of our panelists maybe, but I very sincerely believe that part of the Kashmir narrative damage has also been done by the media, especially the so-called national media. And the only positive that I find from this is that at least we'll have one less villain to hammer at the end of every night. Now the ball is entirely in one court, and now whatever goes well or whatever goes wrong, you really have only one person to blame.
But in your experience, when there is governor's rule that's brought in, and especially in a state like Jammu and Kashmir, do we really see a larger broad-based governance take place in any sense?
Well, look, certainly when the governance rule happens, there are certain aspects of administration that improve. Decision-making is faster. There is more because obviously the governor will have a set of advisors which will advise him directly on issues. And that there are definitely those. Remember, when you have an advisor-led government, it also means that you have more, the bureaucrats have a little more time to deal with directly with the advisors, because political leaders, obviously, there is so much of politics, they spend a lot of time doing politics, and very often the simple process of file clearing itself takes longer. So there are certain aspects of governance that might likely improve. But the question is, that's not a state that can improve simply by some amount of smoothening. I mean, we have a serious problem, and I don't think that's going to get solved simply because certain aspects of administration have become smoother. You need far more than that. And whether that will happen so quickly or not, I really have my doubts.
So I have a question, and any of our panelists can take this one. What should be the immediate solution, or not solution actually, what should be the immediate policy that Centre puts into place to deal with what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir? Yes, please.
I think I'll take...
Yes, Mr. Jalali.
All right. I think immediately you've got to bring... Go ahead. You've got to restore some sense of normalcy in Kashmir before you can think of anything else. And for that, the security forces have to operate under the government. Also, a certain degree of administration has to also come into play, what is called governance. See, Kashmir might be troubled, but Jammu is not. And there is no governance in Jammu either. So you need electricity for people, stop those power cuts, and in the long run, when there is a certain element of normalcy, I think you've got to restart with panchayat elections and devolve power to the people, implement 73rd and 74th amendments of the Constitution to Jammu and Kashmir. You've got every other law except this one. So bring that in.
But for all of that to happen, in the middle of that, Barkha, we have the general elections.
Can I?
Yes.
Well, I just want to make a point that I think was briefly alluded to by Rahul but not elaborated on. The one thing we need to do as a country is to stop fighting internally about Kashmir. I think what really upsets me is the fact that on our television debates, in our parliament, on social media, we are abusing each other and benchmarking each other as nationalist and anti-nationalist all the damned time on our Kashmir policy. We need an all-party meeting. I completely agree the first priority has to be to restore the writ of the state, right? And I know the security forces and the administration will do its job. But don't get complacent after that. Don't lurch from crisis to crisis. And for God's sake, stop squabbling over Kashmir as if it's some, television primetime debate with no consequences beyond that. There needs to be an all-party meeting. Every political party has to agree on the Kashmir policy, so it is not the subject of political bickering and it is not the subject of primetime bickering. This is really, really important. And the other thing I want to say is you cannot solve a problem till you acknowledge it. Government after government in Delhi has been in denial. We want to say if the tourists increase, if the hotels are full, if Gulmarg ski slopes are looking beautiful, Kashmir will get resolved. No. This has been 25 years of an insurgency that has changed shades every 10 years. Wake up, smell the coffee and have a consensus, a political consensus on your Kashmir policy.
Sushant Sareen.
See, I think apart from what Barkha and Rahul have said, I think the single most important thing is that we need clarity on how we want to approach Kashmir. This constant nonsense that we have to reach out to the Hurriyat. For God's sakes, if we seriously think, and we are that stupid that we think that either the Hurriyat can be won over or Pakistan can be made amenable to let us live in peace in Kashmir, I think we need to give up Kashmir altogether. This constant toing and froing between the Hurriyat and Pakistan, I think is the nub of all problems, number one. Number two, I think we need clarity that we are in it for the long haul. And taking off from what Barkha said, neither of the main parties in mainland India have a major stake in Kashmir.
Oops. Okay, technical glitch is always part of a debate. Do we have Sushant back? Okay, we seem to have lost that. Okay, last words from Netri Bhatt as well on this debate, and then we need to start wrapping up. Netri, do you? All right, we don't have Netri at this point as well. Okay, so I'm just going to start wrapping this up now, as we seem to be running out of time any which ways. Here is how it is. Yes, everybody seems to be right now acknowledging the fact that this is a good thing. It perhaps should have happened a long time ago that BJP and PDP went their own ways, that far too much damage was being done with these two ideologically different parties in power. And that perhaps governor's rule is what Kashmir needs right now. Everybody also on our panel today agreed that the first thing that needs to be done is to crack down on those who are spreading terror. People who are living there have a sense of fear. Yes, there is anger. But once you have a grip on the state and on the law and order situation there, then you can actually start looking at what else needs to be done. I wish we had time to go back to Fareed for just a quick question, but here is what it is. People of Kashmir and Jammu and Ladakh want a lot more than loud rhetorics on national television or in the parliament. There are serious issues that must be addressed. Once we have the situation of militancy under control, the government of the day must look at formulating a larger policy when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. We haven't had one. What we instead see is Party A and Party B and Party C come up with their own sets of catchphrases that they think helps them gain some political mileage, whether it is at the center or in the state. You can see words like Hurriyat Pakistan, amnesty, crack down on terror being thrown around. But who really is thinking about the people who are living there? Who really is thinking about giving jobs to the youngsters right now, who, if you don't give them jobs, will very quickly turn toward guns? Who is really thinking about the little children who are braving all odds every day because they want to go to their school and study, but they're not being allowed to? Who is really thinking of those small-time businesses who just want to go trade, sell their fruits and come back and have a normal life? Nobody is. That is the unfortunate part when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. Everybody, every politician uses the state to suit their own narrative and to gain some political points without really doing anything for people living there on ground. From the 90s till date, which is why we're talking about the same issues. Lives are being lost every day. I don't even think any of these politicians really care about what's happening to our forces. Make some loud noises and some talk about some bravado and make some bravery comments, and then leave it for the forces to deal with on ground, irrespective of how many casualties we see. That is what has happened in Jammu and Kashmir. Let us just hope that what has happened today brings in some amount of stability in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.